Yo everybody, what's going on? This is Keegan from Kman Reviews. If you enjoyed this review, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and if you have any opinions all you'd like to share, put them down in the comment section. Eminem, music to be murdered by. Eminem, absolutely legendary Detroit rapper who's actually been present in the rap game since 1988. Ever since his major breakthrough album, the Slim Shady LP, Eminem has been shocking the world with his vulgar, in-your-face, and rather controversial lyrical content. Not to mention widely considered to be on a pretty big losing streak since Marshall Mathers LP 2. I've even heard some people say as far back as The Eminem Show, which I completely disagree. Hell, I'm sure most of you watching this have probably seen my review of his previous album, KmanCf, which I reviewed pretty positively. If you're curious, there will be a link in the corner for you to go check that out. This was yet another surprise album release, much like KmanCf, and it was released earlier this year. I've seen quite a few people call this a massive comeback for M, and also a lot of people call this another flop at the end of the day, so yeah, this one's also very polarizing. But just how do I feel about it? Let's find out as I review it track by track. Again, since it was a surprise album, there were no singles, so we're just going to start right at the beginning of the album with the opener premonition parentheses intro, which fittingly opens up to people getting murdered. An uncredited female vocalist opens up the track vocally with this really well-sung little verse, and then it's just a pure bar track from here on out. It's almost like the ringer of this album, and M's delivery is nice, still the same anger that was present on KmanCf, and about the same content pretty much, especially when it comes to dealing with how people reacted to his last two albums. Also how a lot of fans have this sort of double standard to M, and about how back then he had nothing to say, then puts out Revival where he does have something to say and they hate it. Not to mention a couple cringy one-liners here and there, but in my opinion it's a fitting opener. Good song. Unaccommodating with Young M.A. is certainly a bit of a bizarre collaboration on paper. Young M.A. only features on the opening verse, and it's not bad. Nice rhyme schemes and a rather consistent flow. M takes the rest of the track, and his flow is also pretty nice. He's definitely still got it, but that hook is really barely a hook. It almost just feels like an extension of the verses. He also mentions that the beef with MGK is pretty much over. He cleansed him of his sins, and there were definitely some lines that could be seen as insensitive that I won't talk about or even show on screen. If you've heard the song, you know the lines I'm talking about. In all honesty, that's just M though. His vulgar lyrics have been shocking the world for decades now. This really shouldn't come as a surprise. Anyway, aside from all that, I think it's a good song regardless. You Gon' Learn with Royce da 5'9" and White Gold features this very heavy, ominous beat, very fitting for all three artists, especially White Gold's fantastic chorus. It has this passive-aggressive vibe to it that makes it sound like he's singing directly to the listener. And Royce does his thing on the verse. He blends in pretty well with the dense percussion as he raps about dealing with segregation and determination to fight through it all. M handles the last half of the track. He probably blends in the least out of everyone here, but still possesses a good amount of anger as he raps about busting his ass and being resilient in the rap game. Also taking subtle jabs at T Grizzly in the process. Not a bad song. Alfred parentheses interlude is a brief 30-second interlude with Alfred Hitchcock's voice just describing how the album is basically a certain type of mood over these sort of nostalgic horror movie effects. Personally, I think it could have been better as the opener, but whatever. Those kind of nights with Ed Sheeran, I've seen a lot of people just completely shit on. Maybe I'm biased because I enjoy both artists so much, but I personally enjoy the track. It almost reminds me of Shake That, but with a pop touch on it. Ed handles the chorus, and while he may not have the most confident delivery to talk about drinks and sex, it's still nice when the instrumental gets stripped down for his part. M handles the rest of the track, and sure, his one-liners are especially corny this time around, but it's just meant to be a fun track overall, especially with that thumping bass and slightly out of place eerie synth. Lyrically, I mean, it's basically a song about being at the club, picking up women, kind of standard stuff. I just really enjoyed the track, and in all honesty, I'm probably alone in that regard. In Too Deep is probably one of the weakest links on this album. I've never really been a fan of M talking about his love life, as he tends to get way too in his feelings, and this track's really no exception, showing him flexing his singing voice on that chorus, which is pretty bad behind all that reverb. The instrumental is rather dour with this kind of dragging percussion and this melody that mimics the chorus. Lyrically, it's just about describing all these events that led to the downfall of this relationship. And in all honesty, I can do without this song. Pass. Godzilla with the late Juice WRLD became this massive post-album release hit, even spawning its own challenge on TikTok, and yeah, I can totally see why. That instrumental with the heavy distorted bass, almost like foreshadowing for the onslaught about to happen. Juice WRLD's chorus is great, it blends in pretty well, and him and Em have great chemistry as they're harmonizing on the chorus. Shame he could never hear this song, may he rest in peace. Em's verses are fantastic, almost nostalgic in a way with his rhyme scheme as he raps about how he's a monster, spitting fire causing destruction in the rap game. Also, come on, that third verse, so good. Great song. Darkness definitely took me a little bit of time to warm up to, but wow, I did not expect this track to be as good as it is. This instrumental is really depressing with the light, somber piano keys and pretty airy percussion. Em delivers these bars with this kind of regret in his voice. It's very powerful, even though the track as a whole is 5 minutes long, which, especially with its tone, is something I normally wouldn't like, but this song is very engaging. And that hook is that extra cherry on top. Lyrically, on the shallow end, the track looks like it's about severe anxiety, but it ends up being the first-person perspective of the person who committed the 2017 Las Vegas shooting. It's a pretty heavy song, just proceed with caution if you're lighthearted. Leaving Heaven with Skylar Grey, unsurprisingly, is yet another romantic cut. What really blows my mind is why Em continues to collaborate with Skylar Grey. He must really see something in her, but all I really get is just a pretty nasally singing voice, and that does kind of show on the chorus. This instrumental is pretty bare bones as well. It's mainly just pretty chunky percussion and some very mild synths and strings. Em's verses are okay, they're definitely not the best. It almost sounds like a throwaway from Revival. Lyrically, Em reflects on his success and how all the experiences he's been through turned him into who he is today. It's a fine song, although I can probably do without it. Ya Ya with Royce da 5'9", Black Thought, Q-Tip, and Denon, who's actually Con Artist from D12, was another track I kinda needed to warm up to. The biggest problem for me was the obnoxious Ya Ya's on the chorus from Denon. It just sounds really childish and exaggerated, but I learned to appreciate everything else even more over repeated listens. The rest of the chorus features Royce and Q-Tip is excellent, especially from Q-Tip. Wish we got a verse from him. Black Thought always has a fantastic verse when he's featured, and his vocals are so fitting to this dense, distorted instrumental. Em really doesn't fit in as well as everybody else, but his flow is still pretty good regardless. And lyrically, over the 5 minutes of this track, it's about paying homage to the veterans of hip-hop. It's a good song, but personally, I might need a little bit more time for this one to fully click. Stepdad parentheses intro is just an intro to the next track. I have no clue why he does this. Like, why not just integrate it into one track? I don't know why. Plus, it isn't really the most appealing thing to hear. Stepdad opens up with this incredible instrumental, probably one of my favorites on this entire album. It just packs so much weight with its distorted bass, just feeling like punches to the gut. Also, that hook wasn't my favorite on first listen, but over time it really grew on me, as it molds in pretty well with the instrumental. Em's delivery sounds genuinely angry, and I'm sure he is with this rather tough subject, which lyrically it's about his negative relationship with his stepdad and how he used to purposefully make him feel bad until it all just built up and he ends up killing him. In all honesty, with the anger, this instrumental, and how well the verses are structured, this is definitely an underrated hit. I really enjoy it. Great song. Marsh is a track I'm kinda mixed on. For one, this is another instrumental that I would say is probably another one of the best here. It just feels so otherworldly with that light piano work and the toughest bass on this album. It just goes so hard. However, Em doesn't really have the most engaging delivery, especially on that hook. It's almost kind of weirdly soothing, and the verses just lack the impact that a braggadocious track like this really needs. Lyrically, yeah, it's pretty obvious. He's comparing his name to Martians and using that to allude to being out of this world. Not the best here, but it's really nothing to skip. Never Love Again is pretty much a filler track. It's basically just a pop rap cut, and all the tropes are here. Em giving a rather tame flow, the instrumental being very relaxing and kind of vibey with a little bit of a rock element incorporated into it, and that chorus gets stripped down to a bare piano playing. Everything's there, and it's barely 3 minutes long. There's really nothing here. It's pretty boring, uninteresting, and just about breaking up, which isn't about a relationship, but about drug addiction. Those lyrics are probably the best part of the song. Everything else is pretty mediocre. Skip. Little Engine is definitely one of my favorite songs here. Something about it just engulfs me, and I think it has to do with that instrumental. The high-pitched synths and the deep, distorted bass combined with that standard percussion just sounds like something out of a horror movie. M's verses are really well structured, and his flow is extremely engaging, not even to mention this hook is probably my personal favorite here. Lyrically, it's about M mentioning his drug abuse and evil intentions. Awesome song, certainly deserving of more love. Lock It Up with Anderson .Paak I feel should have had more of an impact than it does. Don't get me wrong, the track is still good. That instrumental has a nice groove to it with its lower tempo, the soothing riff, and the engaging drums. Anderson .Paak also has a nice delivery on his verse, and his chorus is pretty fun, but his voice sounds almost sleepy, like he really just has no energy to his delivery. It feels very off for him. M's voice is fairly nice. I think he has a bit too much anger for his delivery to match the instrumental, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Lyrically, it's simply about getting money and success. It's a good song. I like it. Farewell shares a lot of the similarities that plague Never Love Again, as in it's a very poppy rap track, especially with that instrumental being so squeaky clean. Like, I'm just waiting for some pop artist like Alessia Cara or someone to come on the hook or whatever. M's flow is pretty generic, nothing too noteworthy, and the hook is pretty atrocious. M can't really handle it, and I'm sure any female vocalist could handle it better. And lyrically, it's also pretty similar to Never Love Again, about releasing this tension of a previous lover. This is another track I can also do without. Pass. No Regrets with Don Toliver is yet another track that is a very bizarre combination on paper, but the execution is actually pretty impressive. First off, Don Toliver's hook is really impressive. His voice feels rather genuine, and even with that little bit of autotune sounding a bit like Travis Scott, I still really like it when paired with a melancholic instrumental. I think M has this absolutely perfect delivery. Not too angry, yet still pretty melodic as well. Lyrically, it's basically about having a troubled past and realizing how difficult it was, but also understanding at the same time that if they could go back, they would do it all again in the same way. Great song, I love it. I Will with King Crooked, Royce da 5'9", and Joel Ortiz is another one of my absolute favorite cuts here. Everything here is just so fitting. All the members of Slaughterhouse here over this extremely ominous beat, with these pounds coming in sounding like horror movie effects. Every MC on this track has an extremely appropriate delivery for the song, especially King Crooked. He sounds genuinely evil, and M's chorus is also very fitting. And despite it being the full 5 minutes that it is, I love every second of this engaging song. Lyrically, it's about succumbing to the devil's wishes. Very suitable topic for all these guys. Great track. And finally, the closer, Alfred parentheses outro, is basically the same thing as the interlude of the same name, just instead of Alfred Hitchcock introducing the album, now he's concluding it. I mean, it's a fitting outro, couldn't have seen it being ended out any other way. Overall, I do kind of see why this album is very polarizing. There are a lot of similar songs to stuff like Revival and Recovery and all those albums, and quite a good amount of the hooks can be seen as lazy or even just flat out bad. However, what I personally see from this album is a return. The vulgar, offensive lyrics, less of the shit talking towards critics, and just that whole I'm back feeling I get from a lot of the tracks here after that Revival Kamikaze era. This is a fresh Eminem, and I'm pretty excited for his future. I'm feeling about an 8 out of 10 on this album. Well guys, hope you enjoyed this review. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.